Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons.
Our guests today are the minds behind the loan readiness platform, Parlay. Please welcome Parlay CEO Alex McLeod and COO Jay Long. Welcome to Warrior Money.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
All right, bottom line up front. I'm going to the boss herself. What do small business loan borrowers need to know, Alex?
They need to know that the current process where if you're a small business and you're applying for a loan, you do all that work only to get a no at the end is not the only way. We created our company because we believe that small businesses need more help in the process. Right now, it feels like a pop quiz where you didn't get the answers ahead of time and you didn't get the study materials. And we know that we can do better as a country to help small businesses get to that yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're going to dive in the Parlay. We love the origin story of you as a couple and business owners, and you're a 3-term tech founder, Alex. Give us the story, the origin story of Parlay.
Yeah, it's very oriented to military service. So Joe served in the military. My background was in helping refugees, and together a couple years ago with the Afghanistan evacuation, a lot of folks came from Afghanistan, were evacuated to the US, and a whole community in the veteran community stood up to help them. As part of those people who stood up, the PenFed Foundation helped bring across a group of incredible women, the Afghan female tactical platoon leaders, and helped them integrate into the US, think about their next jobs, their next steps, and a large number of them wanted to start their own businesses. And so the foundation asked us if we could help, and we sat down and we helped these women. And by doing this work, we realized how hard it is for them to get access to capital. You come to the US, you don't have a background or a credit score even, and suddenly you're trying to apply for a loan. As a new business owner, it is so difficult. And so we said, we cannot let this stand. We need to make it easier for small businesses. We need to help them. And that's how we ended up founding Parlay. And we now partner with credit unions and banks across the country to do that and help more small businesses.
Yeah, speaking of entering, the problem that you saw that you wanted to solve, which was difficulty to access of capital, it's very difficult to start a fintech startup, especially during a recession, especially during COVID, especially with the big brands that you're either competing with or having to work with. And trust, as we know, is a huge component to that. So I'd really love to hear a little bit more about your partnership with MasterCard and how that evolved.
I'll start, and
then
Jay, please adds. A lot of what we do is we're trying to create better connectivity between banks and credit unions who issue loans to small businesses and small businesses that are seeking capital from those financial institutions. And MasterCard is an incredible organization in that they have a huge mission in the small business space. They want to help create that access to capital that we care about. They have a lot of data capabilities where they can help make that translation between a loan request and a loan getting approved much easier. And so we were proud to be part of their latest cohort, the Start Path program, where we got to lean in with MasterCard and identify how we can collaborate to get some of MasterCard's capabilities into our system and help distribute our platform through MasterCard out to the banks and the credit unions that need the infrastructure and the software that we have and the data that MasterCard has.
Yeah, and I guess to build off that, I think we're, again, incredibly grateful of them and several other partners. What's interesting about the small business lending space is oftentimes the challenge is transparency, confidence, and understanding. So there's a lot of really helpful data out there that can inform decision-making and help both lenders and small business owners get to yes on capital access. Yes. The problem oftentimes is orchestrating that data and making sure that it's at the point of need for both sides of that marketplace at the right time to guide effective decision-making. So I think we've been humbled by how many people want to help tackle parts of this problem, and creating a platform that enables that intelligence to come together at point of decision is a big point of pride.
I look at it, it's like when you look at history, when after World War II, half the American veterans started in small companies, started iconic global brands like Nike, Walmart, Comcast, right? Our generation of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, I know you served, it's less than 5%. And I do think access to capital is a big deal.
Yeah.
Was there anyone, whether it was PenFed or MasterCard, that really helped guide you through to really initiate this?
Yeah, I'd love to thank the tons of veteran-based organizations that have been partners and the investors and the community of practice itself. I think what has been humbling for us is how many resources are out there. It's a function of just reaching your hand out. So Warrior Rising is a nonprofit, does a lot to help the early stage journey into entrepreneurship. Some of our investors, Hivers and Strivers with Doug Doan, has focused on empowering veteran-owned
Great
businesses.
West Point graduate.
Yeah,
Alma mater.
absolutely.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Building off of that, there's a huge coalition of investors and angels that are trying to help veterans move forward. And I think something we are proud to see is how much there's not really distinguishment between veteran or military spouse. Like once you're part of the community, the goal of all of us is to move forward together. And so there's a sea of goodwill and a ton of people looking to be helpful. And they've been critical to our journey, and they remain constant partners and collaborators.
Yeah, I want to double down on that because this year, 2013 West Point graduate, I was on the board when you were there. Alex, you went to Cambridge and then got your master's at University of Buffalo, but you're a military spouse. And how was it in your experience being a military spouse and a founder of a company? How did our Army, how did DOD treat you?
Amazing, in one word. You can tell I'm not from the US. I'm originally from England, and when we initially started the business, and by the way, even before we started the business, Jay's community has always embraced me. But they stepped up even more when we started the business. And there's never been any distinction in how I'm treated in comparison to Jay. He mentioned some of the incredible organizations. From the second we decided to start the business, we were surrounded by a community of people who have been there for us, who have taken late night calls, who have said, I know it's hard, keep going, I've got you, we'll be your first check-in. Our first check into the business was a veteran. A majority of our investors have focused on backing veterans. I think there's a recognition that military spouses similarly have tremendous grit and intensity and commitment, and it's just been amazing for us.
There's a lot of conversation out there about about your business and the world that you're working in, the interaction between artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data, and I imagine being a new entrant into this space, having to integrate into massive enterprise organizations, that there's a lot of issues. And we know we've got a slew of earnings that are coming up, including Palantir's that just happened and Palo Alto coming up. Can you talk a little bit about your posture on artificial intelligence and enterprise integration, just so everybody here has kind of a firm handle on what that all means and how you think about it?
Yeah, I can definitely get started. Yeah, so when you think about AI-based technologies, it's very easy to spend a lot of attention thinking about the models, but underlying those models are data sets. The reason that's relevant is a lot of small business lending practices is often captured as dark data. So if I'm filling out a paperwork-based application form or I'm doing partial applications online, if you're not aggregating the insights and helping people move forward, not only are they not getting lending, but they're also not creating the foundations you need from a data strategy perspective to learn. So a big part of our work is making sure that from the moment someone starts the journey towards getting a small business loan, we're capturing the data so you can build more inclusive models. If you're only focusing on those who have already gotten loans, you might be unintentionally amplifying bias within the data set, which means that instead of enabling efficiency, you can be much more effective at isolating other groups. And so I think we believe the right data strategy underpinning the right AI implementations unlocks a ton of incredible value.
I love all that. And I would add a couple things. AI is very hot right now. I think, especially in the banking space, which is where we spend our time, there is a recognition from financial institutions that AI can generate efficiencies they've never, ever imagined were possible.
And underwriting process.
Underwriting is a great example of that, right? So just to give an example of Parlay, in our system now, lenders can analyze a loan inquiry in less than 10 seconds. And it uses real-time data. It uses their own parameters. It uses, the bank or the credit union's requirements to say, okay, this is great. And so I think efficiency is at an all-time high and excitement is at an all-time high. But Jay's point is true. Just because you can scale something and make it faster and more efficient could potentially mean that you exclude more people at the end of the day. So you have to be careful about how you use those algorithms, how you build them, how you process before and after the model makes decisions or recommendations. And part of our criteria and our mission is to say, okay, we do want to make this more efficient for the lenders. And we want to make sure the small business gets more transparency and more insight too. It can't be this one-sided way. And if we create the data sets that lenders can then use, we actually help shift that. And if we generate educational materials for the small business as part of that process, we can increase how many of those small businesses get to a yes.
And the other thing I'd love to add to that, and this goes to your earlier comment about the boom of businesses in previous generations, as you make this process more transparent and efficient and scalable, you open up the aperture for the types of small businesses that you can support. And so by expanding into what is traditionally described as a small dollar loan space, where a lot of businesses are going to get started, you lay the foundations for capital access that are really critical to this chapter in American history.
Yeah.
As you're looking at the defense industrial base, the American manufacturing base, a lot of reshoring and nearshoring, while venture capital is going to be part of that conversation, arguably a much bigger part of that is going to be debt-based financing.
Yes.
So the capacity to get small business loans out at scale is a critical prerequisite for a lot of the technologies we're talking about. Like manufacturing requires factories and investment that are most amenable to this type of capital. So we think for our generation and the vets that are thinking about getting in the arena, there's going to be $1 trillion of opportunity that comes as a natural extension of this focus on rebuilding in the United States.
But to be able to do that, to deliver on this economic competitiveness mandate that we're talking about, we need to make that access easier, right? So 93% of small business loan requests are under $1 million. Most of what we're talking about on the NDAA side, on the access to capital side for defense industrial base is for much higher dollar loan sizes. And so there's still that big gap, right? And so this is where technology, and this is the cyber piece, wrapped into a bow here. We have to make it easier for small businesses to be able to access capital. To do that, it has to be more affordable for lenders to be able to assess the eligibility of small businesses. And it has to be risk adjusted. So the parameters and the cybersecurity components have got to be lock tight.
Yeah, that number of 93%, less than $1 million, and then trying to get them to help survive that valley of death that can't do it. So listen, lots to talk about. We're going to be right back with the founders of Parlay in just a minute. All right, welcome back to Warrior Money. We're joined by Parlay Finance's Alex McLeod and Jay Long. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. And it's Valentine's Day, and you are a power couple, the founders of Parlay. Let's get back into some of the struggles, frankly. When you talk about Parlay making it easier for banks to lend, what are some of the regulatory challenges that you have to deal with, cybersecurity challenges you have to deal with, as a young startup?
Yeah. The problem that we picked to solve, capital access, is a wicked problem. So it has about 100 problems wrapped into it. And the organizations that we serve to solve that problem, which is banks and credit unions, are highly regulated entities. And so although we are not a bank and we don't lend money, we're the software that facilitates that process, we have to behave as if we are regulated because our customers are. And so we have very much built with the challenges that they face in mind. They have regulatory requirements they have to adhere to in how they interact with small businesses. They have to safeguard data in ways that, requires very intensive approaches to it. And our co-founder, shout out, also a West Point grad, is a cybersecurity and product specialist who has been building previously to Parlay on behalf of the Software Factory for the US Army. So he brings that level of rigor and diligence and care to the build process.
There's two parts of that I want to unpack, just because I feel like we've got to shout out that U.S. Army comment.
Yes.
We talk about this unstored capital, human capital that we have stored in our United States military, like the amount of skills and talent that we have there and how we apply those to civil problems. And Jay, I know you've got a strong opinion about that, and I've got a very strong opinion about it from the human capital background. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you use your military experience, how your team has captured their military experience, and why that's been so valuable to everybody.
Yeah, I'd love to start by saying to Alex's point, shout out to the team that made this possible. Between the investors and our early teammates, they were willing to get on board. And I think what we learned is that military founding teams are incredibly gritty and disciplined. And a big part of the initial challenge that is building a company is just withstanding the journey. So the grit that you get is incredibly helpful.
Just got to keep going.
Yeah, you got to learn too.
But learn and go.
The cool thing for us is you're a founding team that was disciplined and really gritty, and there were gaps in knowledge. So I just departed military service and immediately went into this. What's fascinating to us is how much even banking knowledge gaps could be plugged by veterans. So we have advisory board members and teammates that are actually veterans who have spent decades in the banking and financial sector. And so you look at marketing. There's certain skill sets vets are going to have when they start businesses, incredibly strong. Operations is an example, building teams is an example. They may have less comparative experience with enterprise sales or marketing or corporate finance. But again and again, we found partners like Bruce Cleveland, who's our CMO equivalent as an advisor member, who's plugged those gaps and done so in a way that allowed a military team to row really hard and really well together. So I think it's been fascinating to see how much potential, to your earlier point, how much capacity is within this community. And it's a function of consistently accessing it and leveraging it. But Alex, what are your thoughts?
No, I couldn't agree more. Our entire founding team, I'll include myself as a military spouse, but Jay and James are both West Point vets, West Point grads, and we've got an incredible team of people with, skills. A former targeter on our team who we use for business intelligence. She is incredible. Trish, shout out to her. She brings those skills from her former targeting work to understanding who is our customer profile that we should be pursuing, where and which conferences they'll be attending. And so she brings these superpowers to the table that you wouldn't see off the bat. You wouldn't think, but then it's an incredible fit for us as we keep building.
And I think that's the beautiful thing about you're telling these stories, and it's like how you've grown this business. And I think for the folks out there, who are maybe transitioning out, and there's about 200,000 active service members that transition out every year, but how could they get started? But it is really, Dan and I talk about this all the time. Your network is your net worth.
Yes.
So when you say, hey, PenFed and Jamie, the CEO, who happens to be a West Point graduate, we talk about with MasterCard. I know the CISO is a West Point graduate, right? Now, him and I are not West Point graduates. I happen to teach there and serve on the board there. But when I was looking at the Parlay website, I saw Sarah Starr. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't talked about Sarah Starr. She's one of your advisors. She was my student at the University of Chicago 10 years ago, right?
That's
It's just a small world.
Yes.
But if you work it, whether you're going into, frankly, bank tech or whatever the case is, whatever industry, you got to work your network. You have to be deliberate about it and using LinkedIn and other things as a force multiplier.
Yes. Can I?
Yes.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. And again, I'm more of an outsider in this community than not. And when I came in, I watched Jay send out the bat signal to his community and say, we're doing this. We need help. And credit to Jay and also this community. They were like, what are you doing? We're going to help you. Let's go. And it has been, we are the limitation.
I'm almost surprised you even got the what are we doing?
Yeah,
sure, let's do it.
Literally, but unquestionably, I've got your back. It's been the takeaway. Warrior Rising is an organization Jay mentioned in the beginning. Jason Van Camp, incredible entrepreneur and service member. Ben Bunn, similarly. We collaborate with them to help up-and-coming entrepreneurs start preparing for access to capital. And so what I would say to folks thinking about transitioning and wondering whether entrepreneurship is for them, the answer is yes. Now let's get you plugged in to the right organizations. Let's get you connected to the right people. Let's get you on the path. Right. Just like you train in the gym to get strong, physically, there's training and there's resources to become strong as an entrepreneur.
We had Liz O'Brien on here talking about military spouses from Hiring Our Heroes, and I just want to correct you. We don't see military spouses as being separate from the military community for the first place. But I am very interested in what has been your perspective of being a military spouse, independent of being an entrepreneur. Like, what have been the challenge that you faced? What are the opportunities that you see, and what would be some of the advice you'd give folks?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually see a lot of military spouse entrepreneurs through programs like Warrior Rising, through the Chamber of Commerce's that have a veteran focus and a military spouse focus. I would say that sometimes I observe that veterans are more trained with discomfort. And it doesn't mean that our tolerance for discomfort is lower. It just means that we sometimes have less reps. And so what I get to benefit from by being a co-founder with Jay is I get to see the practice that he does every day of getting uncomfortable, asking for help, being vulnerable, saying, okay, I need this thing and I have no idea how to solve it.
It's so true.
Can someone help me? And then finding in the network who can, so that comfort with leaning in when he doesn't know is something that I get to benefit from. And I think military spouses, we have it. I don't want to generalize at all. So I find that I get to benefit from your comfort with that discomfort every single day as we build.
Yeah, I think to build off your point, if we were talking to that, just think about transitioning, or maybe a military spouse, just think about getting in there. There are some assets that are compounding over time. You mentioned network. That's definitely one of them.
Yes.
I also think it's really important to talk about the mental game of starting a business. Like, I think we've been humbled by how much you have to withstand discomfort, and those are trained skills. So if you're thinking about making the transition, building your network is important. I think laying the foundations financially to being able to do this. If you're going to launch a business that might need a loan, your credit score is going to matter a lot. So you want to look at that early, but also just gaining confidence in your ability to do this. And I think a big part of confidence is understanding how to tackle the problem. And I think there's a lot of value in using the time to find mentors that can help you understand what is the next ridgeline and the ridgeline after that, and how do I shave down my learning time, and in so doing become much more effective. And as you deliver, you're able to become more confident.
We spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and we spend a lot of time in this business community. And one of the common things that we're talking about is everybody looks at the end destination. They look at the end mountain. They're like, I have to create the next. Name the huge organization that you want to create, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, you've already said like the first $1 million is critical, and in the venture game, you've got to give away significant parts of your business to get any sort of access to it. So as you're scaling up, you're trying to you have to have debt financing as part of your overall financing strategy. Can you talk just a little bit about that perspective? Because I think it's so important on the just getting started point versus the seeing the future too much of it.
Yeah, I can definitely start, Alex. I think it's really important, and I'm speaking more to like the veteran community writ large, to recognize that the capital stack is really deep. I think it's easy to bias towards massive instruments, like maybe it's a loan or maybe it's equity-based investment, but there's a lot of other tools, from lines of credit to business credit cards and other mechanisms of making sure you can grow, that need to be part of your strategy. And so I think I would encourage vets to make sure that they find a banker they can trust and have early conversations, not just about like startup capital, but once the company is growing, what is the gap between invoicing going to look like? How do I need to manage cash flow? What products or tools allow me to bridge that chasm? And how can I therefore build the right tools early so that we're going to be in a really effective place later on?
I love that. One extra thing I would say is I think a mistake early entrepreneurs make is that like, I need to raise money. And the question is your business the type of business where you should raise money? Or is your business the type of business where actually, over time, debt is an instrument for growth? But when you're starting out, Warrior Rising is a good example. PenFed is a good example. There are lots of competitions, grants, non-dilutive funding sources that you can pursue.
Yeah.
Take targeted bets, build forwards with those learnings incorporated.
The comment that we hear consistently is how hard cash flow management is. And there are multiple ways to finance yourself for cash flow management just to be able to run a sustainable business. And I think what you guys are trying to do help us bridge a lot of those gaps. So it makes a ton of sense to me.
And part of that trust and character, we are leaders of character, right? That's our mission statement at West Point, right? And I think it's a special thing about paying it forward to the next generation and making sure they succeed. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us on Warrior Money. That's going to wrap it up. So thanks for joining us today. Don't forget, follow us on wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever it is, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons. We'll see you next week.